Hey everyone, my name is Cody Beinert, and today I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the latest record from Dvne entitled Voidkind. Dvne is a Scottish progressive sludge metal band that I have been a pretty big fan of ever since I first heard their previous record, Etamin Anka, when it dropped in 2021, which was an album that I loved so much at the time, to the point where I announced it as my album of the year for 2021. And I would still consider it to be one of the better progressive metal records of recent memory. That album, along with their debut, Asheron, really made me an admirer and an enjoyer of Dvne's particularly very atmospheric, grandiose, and kind of triumphant take on prog and sludge metal that is comparable to the likes of Mastodon or The Ocean or Baroness, but still with enough of their own personality to prevent things from feeling too derivative or as if they feel like some kind of clone of those aforementioned bands. And so naturally, when this record in question was announced in, I believe sometime back in March, I was very pumped for this. And so, does it live up to the hype that I felt for it? Well, I guess let's find out. Voidkind essentially continues a lot of the momentum and the ideas that were present on their past couple of records. Like, if you've heard like any Dvne record, like, you'll know approximately what this will sound like. Lots of like relatively lengthy, somewhat multi-phased pieces, very big, massive dynamic soundscapes, lots of contrast between these like very ambient post-rock-ish passages with like these very sludgy, proggy, kind of at times doomy riffs. And throughout the record's runtime, like, all of these elements are still very interesting, very effective, and very entertaining to listen to. However, I would also say that compared to their past two albums, while there are some refinements, which I will get to in a bit, overall it's not quite as effective as before, in my opinion. However, I will start by mentioning the positives. Compared to previous records, vocally, this album feels a lot more confident and a bit more emotive, in my opinion. The screams are a bit less monotonous and have a lot more bite to them and a bit more passion and anger behind them. Meanwhile, the clean vocals and the clean harmonies and melodies are at times like hookier and more well sung than before. Not to mention, production wise, this thing is awesome. It sounds huge, it sounds organic. The album starts really strong with the opening track Summa Blasphemia, with these very groovy riffs that immediately grabbed me, and the song goes through lots of very interesting twists and turns throughout to keep me on my toes and really keep me engaged. And a lot of the same thing can be said about the following track, titled Eleonora, which is a lengthier and somewhat more expansive track compared to the opener, while still having a very similar momentum to Summa Blasphemia. The following track, titled Reaching for Telos, has this very weirdly kind of uplifting and upbeat energy to it that really gets me pumped, resulting in it being one of my personal favorites on the album. By the time we get to Reliquary, all the elements that I've described before start beginning to feel a little predictable and not quite as impactful. I don't feel like there's quite as much effort put into these songs at really giving them their own distinct personality as on their previous works, in my opinion. And while there's still enough things to prevent myself from feeling like I'm listening to the same song over and over and to prevent me from feeling bored, I still don't know if I'm as fully like gripped by everything as I would want. And don't get me wrong, the song Reliquary is still great in of itself. I especially love that, I think, kind of 7/8 riff that kicks off the whole track, and towards the end, said song builds into a pretty interesting climax with these vocals that sound as if they're like ranting and raving on top of these wall of sound guitars. But within the context of the album, it's maybe not quite as epic as I feel like it really wants to be. But regardless, it's still very strong. We then have this little interlude, Path of Dust, that seamlessly transitions into the next track titled Sarmate, which I think is trying to be this like more aggressive and more immediate and briefer cut. But since the song still uses very similar kinds of dynamics and riffing styles compared to the rest of the album, it feels to me like a song that should be like a good 5-6 minutes, just whittled down to only 4.5. And I know that 4.5 minutes is a relatively average time length, but for the standards of Dvne's particular songwriting style, it does almost feel a little bit underdeveloped by comparison. Still, it is a cool track with lots of really great moments. After another okay interlude and the track Abode of the Perfect Soul, which is a song that I don't really have much to comment on other than it's approximately more of the same, still done very well. We then get to Pleroma, which was the album's lead single, which is also when the band finally do something that does feel a bit more significantly different. For this song has probably some of the hookiest and most engaging vocal harmonies that I think I've heard from a Dvne song yet, to be honest. At times I am reminded quite a lot of like Crack the Sky era Mastodon, and I mean that in the best way possible. The album then concludes with this pretty epic finale titled Cobalt Sun Necropolis, which justifies its runtime with these very interesting, meditative, atmospheric passages that build tension towards the more upbeat, riffier moments. And it leads up to a really intense climax, as we get these really huge sounding riffs and guitars and whatnot, before the song purposefully starts getting more distorted and more messy to kind of create a sense of tension, before things very abruptly sort of cut as we get this sort of eerie little ambience to close things out. So yeah, overall I did have quite a lot of fun with Voidkind. I am maybe a little disappointed that I'm not as in love with this as, say, Etaman Anka or Asheron. It's not quite the album of the year contender that I was hoping it would be for the reasons that I've already stated. But regardless, in a vacuum, this thing still is super fun, super entertaining to listen to front to back. There's lots of great riffs. The production is fantastic, as I've mentioned already. The vocals are more confident and more professional than usual, I think. And if you love other bands like Mastodon or Baroness or The Ocean or, I don't know, Psychonaut maybe, this is definitely a band that I would highly recommend checking out. And so yeah, those are my thoughts on the latest record from Dvne. Please let me know what you think of this album if you've already heard it. And as always, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!